Good evening, everyone. This is the Planning and Development Committee meeting for Monday, September 12th, 2011 for the City of Evanston. We have a quorum present. We have before us as the first item on the agenda approval of the regular minutes of August 8th, 2011.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. And this evening, items for consideration. We have 3 items on the agenda. There are a number of people who are here to speak to certain of the agenda items, and I think what we'll do is we will have the speakers address the respective agenda items before that agenda item. So in other words, we'll deal with agenda items 1 and 2 first, because the vast majority of these speakers are relating to the third item, and we do have one speaker for P2. So P1 is Ordinance 75-011, granting a special use for a Type 2 restaurant at 1701 Sherman Avenue in the D2 Downtown Retail Core Zoning District. The staff and the Zoning Board of Appeals recommend the adoption of Ordinance 75-011, granting a special use permit for the operation of a Type 2 restaurant at 1701 Sherman Avenue. Warren Johnson Architects, Inc., on behalf of, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong since I did not take French class, but Pret-a-Manger, a contract lessee, applied for the special use permit to operate the Type 2 restaurant. Pret-a-Manger, thank you very much. This is for introduction tonight, and we do have Yvonne Gilbert here from the restaurant, but
Second.
is there any discussion?
Is there somebody here?
There is someone here if there are any questions, I think. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'd like to know what,
Ms. Gilbert, would you like to step to the podium? And then introduce yourself once you're there.
can I ask my question?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to know what pre-made on site means. I mean, is it made on site, or is it pre-made and delivered to site? What does that mean?
Okay.
And how do you pronounce the restaurants?
My name's Yvonne Gilbert with Warren Johnson Architects. The name of the restaurant is Pret-a-Manger.
Thank you.
That's as close as I can get.
Okay. And did you hear Alderman Rainey's question about the prepared food?
Yes, from what I understand, all the ingredients are delivered on site daily, and they are prepared on site in the morning before they are put out for sale.
So you don't go in and order, you have to buy what's already pre-made, or, do you know what I'm saying?
It's
I mean,
just the pure ingredients that are brought on site, and everything's prepared on site.
So you can go up to the counter and order a sandwich that isn't already pre-made?
I don't believe so. I think everything's already out, and you just grab it and
Because it
come up
does
and
say
buy it.
pre-made. All right, I
Right.
get it. That's what I was
Right.
wondering, if that's what it meant.
There's one in the Loop, and I've been a occasional customer there, and that's the food's all out in a series of cases or heated display cases, and you just select what you're choosing. But I understand that they just make it backstage and put it in the case. Right? Right. Any discussion or further questions? All right. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. This is moving along for introduction. Thank you very much. Item P2, Ordinance 77-011, proposed amendment to the existing approved plan development at 1100 Clark Street / 1719 Ridge Avenue. Staff and the Site Plan and Appearance Review Committee recommend approval of the proposed amendment, Ordinance 77-011, to the existing approved plan development at for 1100 Clark Street, 1719 Ridge. Ordinance 5004 as amended by Ordinance 125-005. Focus Development has proposed constructing a 175-unit rental development on the vacant lot that is part of the approved plan development, commonly known as Sienna Development. And we do have a speaker who signed up for this. It's a little hard to read, but Bob Cannizzaro. Thank you. And if you just state your name and your address when you step up.
I'm Bob Cannizzaro. I'm resident of 1800 Ridge. We're just catty corner from the site. And I have some comments that kind of gathered among residents of the building. I'm not going to go into any great detail. I'm just kind of list the comments that we're concerned about. It seems to be an increase of density by as much as 20% from the original permit. It's gotten some attention in our group. We're assuming that the setback change is because it's to align with the existing building. I've pretty well sold it from that point of view. I hope that's right. But the decreased setback concerns us a little bit about traffic visibility on the southwest corner of the building as turned from Ridge to Clark. And we're a little puzzled with the mix of apartments being 75% one-bedrooms and 25% two-bedrooms. We're kind of curious about what the resident profile might be in this situation. Not aware of what the market is for rental apartments, so I don't really know what that might be, but it may be useful if someone would comment on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Is there a motion?
Could we hear a response from the
Well,
developer?
there will be a presentation. I guess I wanted to.
I move approval.
Second.
All right. And we do have a presentation from David Riefman and I think Justin Pillay.
Good evening, members of the Planning Development Committee. My name is David Riefman from the law firm DLA Piper, and along with Greg Grains, we represent the applicant in this matter. I'm joined tonight, as you noted, by Justin Pillay, the Director of Development for Focus Development, and the project architect, George Halleck, from Booth Hanson, and other members of our project team. Thank you for this opportunity to present. As you noted, the city adopted a PD ordinance permitting the construction of the Sanic condominiums with 256 units. This was passed in 2004. It was to be built in 4 phases in 4 separate buildings. Phases 1 and 2 were built on the east half of the property for a total of 111 units. But as a result of market and economic conditions, prior to Focus, our client, becoming involved, phases 3 and 4 were started but never completed. And today, this site is an eyesore, poses several safety issues, and is basically in need of being mitigated. The west half of the site that we're talking about today is owned by an affiliate of Inland Bank. Since last fall, Focus has been working with the bank, the Siena Condominium Board, and city representatives and staff to develop a plan to complete construction of the site. After many months of studying the site, analyzing market conditions, and many meetings with the property stakeholders, including Alderman Braithwaite, who is here, residents of Siena, and others, Focus finalized a plan to develop it with 175 luxury units. To permit construction of the project, I think we want to quickly review what the relief is, since that is one of the questions. We are asking to increase the total number of dwelling units from 256 to 286. But as we pointed out in our correspondence, this is still less than the 287 maximum which is permitted in the existing zoning district. We're looking to decrease the number of parking spaces from 365 to 354, but this ratio, again, is consistent with the new guidelines for downtown development that are being considered by the city. We're looking to increase the FAR from 2.0 to 2.25, but this is a technical issue with the manner in which the FAR was measured. It really is not bigger than the project that was proposed. We're asking to decrease the Clark Street setback from 12 feet to 7 feet 4 inches, and to decrease the setback along Ridge from 20 feet to 13 feet as shown on the site plan, but the project will remain 20 feet or more from the curb line of Ridge. There are no modifications to the approved height, no modifications to the approved lot coverage. All of that remains the same. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Justin in 1 second, but I want to quickly point out a few significant public benefits. First, the redevelopment of the west half of the site will be done with a LEED silver luxury building sensitive to the surrounding area. Second, it will contribute to the local economy by introducing new customers to downtown and is expected to generate in excess of $500,000 in new property taxes. And the project will also include 9 additional affordable units. So I'm going to ask Justin to quickly run through the details of the presentation, so the plan itself, so that you can see it. And then we can answer any additional detailed questions.
Good evening. Again, my name is Justin Pillay with Focus Development. As David mentioned, our involvement in this project started last fall, so well over basically a year ago at this point. The property is bank-owned, as you're well aware, and we got the property under contract several months ago, and we're working hand-in-hand with the bank through the due diligence period, and I must mention that staff has been very helpful, and it's been a very pleasant and well-organized event to get to this point, so I want to make note of that. Maybe we can go to the slideshow here. I'm not sure who's controlling it. Do you have the... Oh, I am here? Okay. See if we can figure this out. Okay. So for the aldermen who aren't aware with Focused Development, we've been in business since 1993. We've done about a dozen projects in the city of Evanston to date, and some of them up here are highlights of projects we have completed, including Sherman Plaza, Church Street Station, and several others. One other project that's on this slide that should be noted is the Reserve, which is just down the street here. That project was developed by Atlantic Realty, and they will be our operator for the proposed apartment building. So they have experience in Evanston. They know how to run a professional building, and I think their track record here in Evanston shows that. The project site itself, as you're well aware, is on Clark and Ridge. It abuts the current Sienna Condominium Association. As David mentioned, we've been working with the Condo Association now for several months. I think we've probably had a total of 7 or 8 meetings with them, and many of the members are here tonight in support of the project. All in all, there's a lot of complex issues out there, as you can imagine. There's a 2-story hole in the ground. There's been flooding. There's many things that we have to work through. But I think the good news at this point is certainly that we are working in good faith with the Condo Association. There's a lot of work that the developer left behind that we've committed to helping the Condo Association finish, and to really make this project complete, both for the residents of the condominium building, but also for the city of Evanston. Again, this is the site. You can see, I don't know if there's a laser on here, but to the right, that's the existing condominium buildings, 2 buildings in total, and then on the left there is the hole in the ground. Okay, thanks. Again, some pictures here of the existing conditions along Ridge and Clark. Mostly you'll see when you go out there is construction fence. Behind the construction fence is a 2-story hole in the ground. This is an example here of where the construction stopped right at the condominium building. That's where the pool was going to be. For example, when we get into the presentation, we'll mention specifically the amenities that we're planning on providing, one of them being the pool, which the condo owners will have the ability to buy memberships to and be able to access those amenities the same as the apartment renters. Moving on, I'll turn this over to George Halleck, and I think Alderman may have something to say as well here. So,
good evening. I just wanted to share on behalf of the residents that are here in support of the project. If you could just quickly raise your hands. Thank you. So this project is near and dear to my heart. Just a quick brief story. 7 months before I was seated, I sat in on a meeting where the mayor hosted, and this was one of the issues that was brought up, the hole in the ground. So the next day after that meeting, I was driving up and down Ridge looking for a hole in the ground. And come to find out that it was a much bigger issue and more like a crater. But I do want to thank the residents who have been, just so passionate about this, as well as the city staff, Steve, Dennis, and Walter, just bringing me up to speed on it. And to the focus group, they've really done an incredible job working with the residents to go through each and every issue. And in the city of Evanston, where there's so many attitudes and opinions, that's no easy task. And I'm confident to say that, this project has the support of the Condo Association, who will be greatly impacted by the project. I am also happy to say that there was an issue with the ADA that has been resolved as well, and you all received that memo. And also excited to share that it should generate approximately $55,000 in permit and fees. So simply said, I'm in support. There are residents that are here in support, and I hopefully that this goes through and passes through council. Thank you.
I'm George Halleck with Booth Hanson Architects. I want to say that not only am I proud to be part of this project as the architect, but I'm an Evanston resident, and I will be ecstatic if something is built on this site. Let me just quickly go through the design of the project. Oops, what did I do? Okay. This is the site plan, and just to point out a few things here. The building that we're talking about is this Z-shaped building here. The phase one are these two existing buildings here with the existing plaza in between. So the scope of our work is this 8-story building and the amenities, which is a little pavilion right adjacent to a swimming pool right here. In terms of circulation, the entrance to the building is off of Ridge right here, which leads to an elevator core here. Cars will either, and most of the cars, 16 cars will enter off of the alley on the south into a small on-grade parking area here. The majority of the cars will enter off of Clark and go down to a lower level, 2 lower levels of parking below the building and the plaza. What you see out here and these elements right here are balconies, which will be in front of the main building facade, and you'll see more of that as we show the facade. I want to quickly run through the plans. But before I do that, before we leave the site plan, I'd like to ask Ted Wolf, our land. Keep going? Go ahead. Okay. Then I will proceed. This is the lower level of parking. The upper level of parking is this area right here, where I mentioned you enter off of Clark Street. This is the ground floor level, where I mentioned that the entry right here. By the way, off the alley is the loading area, service dock, which again leads to the core, the little bit of parking. These are units on grade, which have terraces outside of their unit. And behind that, because this is butting up to parking, below grade parking adjacent, is some tenant storage. The second floor start to get more typical units. The next level, by the time you're at this level, you are now adjacent to the plaza, the existing plaza behind here. So at this level is where we have what we're calling our amenities building, which will be a fitness center and also a cyber cafe, which opens up to this plaza, which includes the swimming pool. Now we're getting into the typical floors. This is the 4th through 8th plan, showing the different types of units: 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, with the elevator core here. This is a perspective view of the building. I also have, if you'd like to see it, a little model, very tiny model, here that kind of shows. Doesn't have much detail in it, but I think it's actually a little bit more explanatory than this. But this shows you that what we're going to do here is we're going to repeat the materials that were used on the Sienna building, meaning that this buff-colored brick, which is on the other buildings, we will be using. This is a building that looks distinctive, but it will blend with the rest of the Sienna complex, so it'll still look like one complex. And so we're using the buff-colored brick with some stone on the base, some steel lintels over the building, painted steel or natural anodized aluminum. You can see that there's a fair amount of glass used. Most of the glass is at the living rooms, except for the top floor. The balconies that I mentioned will be in front of the main facade. One thing that you see in that model is that we've articulated the masses so that you don't see it as one building, either from the east or for the west. You don't see it as one building because we've got these little recessed notches here. So you really read this part of the building a little bit separate from this part to kind of break down the scale. These are hard to read.
There's a question.
I'm sorry.
Right here.
Question.
And then
Can-
I have one down here, too.
Okay. Alderman Wynn.
Should I go back to the other slide?
No.
Yeah, if you could, yes, could you hold, so is the top floor, is that
are those apartments at the top
Yes,
floor that are
yes,
floor-to-ceiling glass?
Yes, all the floors are the same. The reason why we articulated at the top, again, we looked at many schemes for this, and we wanted to break down the visual mass of it. So to articulate the top is one trick we use to do that. But otherwise, all the floors are typical, basically.
And then what is the quality of the lighting that you're going to be using in the units throughout the building? Because
Inside
yes, because we've had some various developers over time who, not to suggest that you're going to do this, who don't use particularly high-quality lighting in some of our condo developments in the city, and the buildings really suffer because of that. And clearly, your design is dependent on these windows. So what is the type of lighting that you're going to have in these units?
Well, first of all, we haven't selected the lighting yet, and it will be energy efficient when we do.
Right.
But the lighting that we'll provide, and this is pretty typical in apartments and condos, is actually in the kitchens and the bathrooms and those areas. We won't be providing light fixtures in the living room, assuming that people will bring in lamps and things like that. So when you look at the plan, those are the areas that are closest to the windows. So most of the light you see, I believe, will be fixtures that the tenant brings.
As developer, I can commit that you won't be seeing the cloud fixtures or surface mount fixtures at the windows.
That you know what I'm talking about? Yes, okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I think Alderman Holmes was next. Question?
Tell me what view that is. Is that looking westward or east?
This is standing across Ridge on the west side of Ridge, looking southeast.
Okay, so when you're coming east on Church and make your left-hand turn to head north on Ridge.
East on Church, yes.
Okay, you got me?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so you're going north on Ridge, and right now there's a lane that goes out to make a right turn only.
Mm-hmm.
What happens with that? And I'm trying to, in terms of, because you keep talking about everything going off of Clark, traffic going off of Clark.
Let me go
But you
back
have
to
either
that, because
go
I
there-
did forget to mention something here.
Yeah, because you have to either go there to get on Clark, or you have to come down Oak to get on Clark. And I'm asking this because I'm over there 2 or 3 times a week, because that's my church right across the street. So I'm just sort of interested in how that's going to flow with the traffic.
Oops, sorry. Okay. One important thing that I did, I think what you're talking about is when you're going north on Ridge, you pull off to turn into Clark?
Yeah, there's a separate lane there that makes a right turn only.
There is. So right along there, we haven't changed the street curb, but we have introduced a drop-off lane so that anyone that's dropping off anyone, a resident or a guest, can pull off and not interfere with traffic that's going this way.
Well, I'm not concerned about the traffic that's going to continue north, because that's fine now. But I'm talking about that one lane of traffic that is right turn only. And
Right here.
It remains. So then you have some kind of turn off of that for your drop off?
What you're talking about is the lane that exists right here when you turn into Clark, and here is our drop-off right here.
So how does that, I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time picturing what that, because, I mean, the lane is not that long, and where's your drop-off in terms of, how far is that from the alley?
Okay. The alley is right along here. As you come north on Ridge, that right turn lane remains intact, nothing changes there, okay? There's a little drop-off here in addition to that right turn lane where we envision maybe like a UPS truck or someone just parking temporarily so they can make deliveries. All the people that park in this project are going to, well, most of the people that park in this project are going to have to turn right and go in off of Clark over here. There's no curb cuts or anything along Ridge. So if you're going to Church, for example, going north on Ridge, you won't notice anything different except there'll be a little bit of a drop-off area on our property.
Right, and so when you turn, then you make your right turn onto Clark.
Correct.
Which heads east.
Yep.
So how are they going to get into the parking lot? Because all of that along there now,
Right now it's two-way traffic, and there's a parallel parking there, so two of those stalls, we'd have to, pay you guys, to remove those two stalls. People would turn right into the garage, and when they go to leave, they could either turn left to come back out the ridge, or they can go right and around the block into downtown.
And that little, where you're talking about your amenities to be,
Yeah.
where now there's a stairway that goes up there?
Right now.
Is that where you're talking about?
No, right now, this amenities are on this upper level. So if you go out there today on Oak Street, there's a big ramp that comes up off of Oak Street to this turnaround level, and that's where the amenities are at. The current condo owners, they come in off of Oak Street and pull into the garage.
How they do. I'm still talking
Yeah.
about Clark.
Sure,
Go back to Clark, and on Clark, as you come off of Ridge,
sure.
about, it's not even about midway the block, there's a stairway that
Sure.
goes up. Is that?
No, that stays all intact.
That
Our
stays all
entrance is west of that.
Oh, okay. Oh, west of that.
What you're talking about is right here.
Okay, I got you. Okay. Okay. I see it now.
Okay. Alderman Fisk?
Thanks. Could we go back to the picture of the west elevation of the building? Yeah. What, are the balconies opaque, or can you see through them? My concern is that with a large number of students that will probably occupy the building, they tend to use balconies as storage. And that's just going to destroy the, I think, integrity of the view from the west. Can you put something opaque there? Am I seeing
Well,
something
we're
opaque, or is
thinking
it-
we're thinking about glass balconies, but the glass can be opaque, or it can be frosted so that you really won't see what's behind it.
Okay. And then will there be rules that you cannot load and unload a moving truck in the front, so that with the reserve, that really has slowed down traffic on Ridge, but that's a different dynamic with just two lanes.
Yeah,
But-
the reserve is a little different setup. Here we have separate loading area off the alley, clearly out of traffic and everything. And there will certainly be rules as far as move-ins and move-outs. And to that extent, there will certainly be rules about storage on patios and balconies and so on. So, to the extent that there's any issues at the reserve, I'm not aware of them, but I can guarantee you that, we're going to have rules to keep people from doing improper move-ins.
And there's an on-site manager?
There's an on-site manager that does leasing and so on, and there's also on-site engineering as well. So everything is contained within the project.
Thank you.
All right, did you want to finish up?
Yes, I'm done.
All right, I'm just going to roll through these last few slides real quick. Description of the units. The approximate average size is 858 square feet, smaller units. We did do a full market study with Tracy Cross and supported the unit sizes and our mix and all that. So we're very comfortable with where we're going in that direction. Every unit will have in-unit laundry, 9-foot ceilings, so on and so forth. Luxury apartment finishes, which I'll show you some pictures of. These are literally condo-level finishes that we're going to be putting in here. The amenities, we already kind of went through: swimming pool, fitness center. It's a LEED silver building per ordinance, but clearly that's an amenity to people that are renting there as well. This is an example of Atlantic Realty's other apartments in their portfolio, so we'd be matching similar quality to this. So 42-inch cabinets, granite tops, higher-end finishes. Here's a more modern look per se. And then this is actually a picture of the corridors at the reserve, which, again, the same quality that we're proposing here. Schedule, our goal is obviously to get through entitlements hopefully tonight. With that said, if that happens, we're going to release drawings and get in for a footing and foundation permit ASAP. We want to start this building in November if possible, with the idea of having first move-ins in November of next year and then closing out the project in the winter of next year. Obviously, there'll be some lease up, but again, we feel the market's very strong. We have the market study to prove it. And probably most importantly at this point is we have construction financing. The bank who holds the property is committed to financing the project and essentially build their way out of this. So we're very happy to be able to jump on this as soon as possible. So with that said, I think that kind of wraps up our presentation. If you have any questions, certainly let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, can you tell us what you're looking at for rentals of the one bedroom?
As far as The
rental-
demographic or
the rental rate?
rental rate. The markets, right now, our pro forma is running at about $221 a foot on average. So obviously, like the studio units would probably be in the 230s. The 3 bedrooms would be like in high 190s, low $2 range.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Alderman Fisk?
Since you're going to be building to condominium quality standards, is there any thought that this?
Yeah, microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Since you're going to be building to condominium quality standards, is there any thought to making this a condominium down the road?
I mean, that's certainly an exit strategy. I'm not saying that's not the reason why we're doing the condominium finishes. That's what the market demands. But clearly, I mean, if you look long term as exit strategies go, one would be to sell an apartment building that's doing well to an institution, 10 years from now or whatever that might be. The other would be to convert to condos. But right now, our intent is to hold it as an operating building and have a nice quality apartment building in Evanston.
Thanks.
All right, we have a motion and thank you very much. Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the matter will move on to the council, and understand that there will be a motion to suspend the rules at the council. Thank you. Item P3, application for a special use for a bed and breakfast at 300 Church Street in the R1 Single-Family Zoning District. The Zoning Board of Appeals is recommending the City Council to deny the application for a special use permit to operate a bed and breakfast at 300 Church Street. The Site Plan and Appearance Review Committee and staff declined to make a positive recommendation due to practical concerns about parking. A draft ordinance will be provided at a future meeting, which we do not have at this point. And if the Planning and Development Committee and City Council disagree with the ZBA recommendation to deny. And we have a number of speakers tonight, and I think we do have a brief presentation. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on the speakers first, and that will allow the presenter to perhaps answer some of the questions that are raised in the public comment section. I'm going to call people up 3 at a time. The first 3 are, I believe it's Donald Hay, Mary Singh, and Kent Swanson. And please state your name and your address when you step to the podium. Yeah, because this is our committee meeting, we still have council business after. If you could keep your comments to maybe around a minute or so.
My name is Donald Hay. I live at 1635 Hinman Avenue, which is about a block and a half around the corner from the proposed bed and breakfast. I am in favor of the bed and breakfast. I think it will bring a number of benefits to this community without adding any detriment. I have stayed in bed and breakfasts from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, and I have yet to find a bed and breakfast that caused a problem within the community they were situated. In fact, quite to the contrary, the bed and breakfasts actually helped those communities. They brought people into the community in some of the worst parts of Washington, D.C., and they changed the way that community behaved and changed the appearance of the community. Now, in our case, we don't have to worry about the appearance of the corner where this house is located, but we do have to worry about whether or not that house will remain if something isn't done, such as a bed and breakfast, or if it is not improved. And I think, for me, I'm very concerned about the structure and the structure remaining there and being improved. I am also concerned about bringing people into Evanston to use our restaurants and to use our other facilities. I think it will attract people into the city to contribute to our economic well-being. Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, I'm Mary Singh. I live at 1711 Hinman and have lived there for 40 years. And during that 40 years, it has been a concern of mine to protect the whole neighborhood from incursions of business, because several times in the course of living there, people have tried to start businesses in the area, and you just have to be eternally vigilant, as they say. In your description of this that your chairman just read, it said that the site plan and appearance review committee was concerned about parking, but I want to bring to your attention what I thought in the ZBA meeting was the main concern of the people there, and that's that the ordinance that provides for a bed and breakfast clearly states that it is to be, what is the term? I've got it underlined in pink, yes. It's to be an accessory use, accessory to an owner-occupied single-family or two-family residential building. Alderman Rainey is the only one of you who was here at the time that this zoning ordinance was passed, and I don't know if she remembers it the same way I do, but we were concerned at that time that there might be people, taxes were going up in Evanston. We were concerned at that time that there might be people who were living in a house in Evanston, wanted to continue living there, couldn't quite make it on the taxes, might want to get their kids to stay here and finish their high school, and that those people would then be able to start a bed and breakfast. But they would be people who already lived in Evanston. This is a situation where somebody is going to come in from the western suburbs, a 1% owner of the property, and run a bed and breakfast. Secondly, we all assume that sooner or later these people who are running a bed and breakfast would either move away or die. But an LLC doesn't ever die, so it may never move away. So once we get a business on that block, that business can stay forever. I hope that you'll reject this. Thank you.
Yeah, Ken Swanson.
My name is Kent Swanson. I live at 1630 Judson, about a block away from the proposed bed and breakfast. I'm strongly in favor of the facility. I think other people will talk about kind of the good neighbor factor. I think that Colonel Pritzker has had a home immediately adjacent to this home for several years. He did a wonderful job renovating that, and with his other property in Rogers Park, that's a bed and breakfast. There's a Frank Lloyd Wright house. He's done tremendous work with historic homes. But I'd like to focus on more the business aspects of this. I'm in the real estate business myself. I'm a partner at the John Buck Company. We built the Park Evanston here in town. So it's something that I do have professional knowledge of. I think this brings, as the first one said, a great alternative for lodging to the community. It's a definite positive. There's maybe one or two other operating bed and breakfasts that are quite small, and this is a very minimal impact, but it's in a different part of town than the other ones are, so it's a nice alternative. Secondly, I think that this is important from an economic development standpoint. The city is making a very big investment in economic development staff and working very hard to promote a more business-friendly image and to create more certainty and to bring more economic activity in town. And when we have a very public process like this that we're creating a lot of uncertainty over and reading a lot of intent into regulations that is not written in those regulations, I think that sends a very bad message to the business community who's already nervous about investing in Evanston. And I think that to kind of follow those kind of paths is an unwise choice in my view. Lastly, from the standpoint of home values in the town, this transaction would be a significant benefit, particularly for what I've seen very recently in commercial transactions. It's also been very prevalent in single-family home transactions is the appraisal process, and comps for appraisals are not available, and appraisers are getting very conservative with new regulations, and having a positive comp that people can point to. It just is a positive thing for real estate values. And so people that are questioning the value statement that this would hurt values, I think they're dead wrong in my professional view, not that I'm an appraiser, but what I see, and that this would be a very positive view for home values throughout the community. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three speakers are John Henderson, and it's hard to read this one, Blabalo, and Candace Kuzmarsk.
Judy, I have copies of.
There are microphones on both sides if anyone would like to.
Good evening. My name is John Henderson. I live at 115 Dempster, which is on the lakefront, and I've lived there for over 20 years. We've already had an experience with someone who wanted to create a bed and breakfast next to us, and luckily that did not go through. For the same reasons, I would object to granting the special use permit, basically for the following reasons. And they do get redundant, I know. It would be commercial enterprise in a residential community, which would attract additional traffic, noise, and parking. Now, this is being addressed extensively already by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they did realize that this would be a major issue for this particular site due to the lack of parking and other issues. Such corporate ownership does not follow the intent of the existing Evanston ordinance for B&Bs. It's an LLC. It's not a personal residence of somebody running a bed and breakfast. I have no problems with bed and breakfasts per se. I, too, have stayed in many over the years. But I think it would set a dangerous precedent and encourage further commercialization of Evanston's lakefront, and it would change the fabric of the community. I would not want my house surrounded by commercial B&Bs in the future, which is what is being proposed here. It has the potential to reduce property values in one of Evanston's most desirable neighborhoods. There is no problem with this area of Evanston, and I do not see any value in a B&B in the area, and I think it's a potential when you have one next door to you that it would decrease or would be an issue to a purchaser. Approval of this special use permit would make a sham of the existing ordinance, as I've outlined. I strongly urge the City Council and the Planning and Development Council to deny this permit. Thank you.
I'm Rick Blabelo. I live at 2325 Forest View in Evanston. Been a proud resident of Evanston for over 30 years and also a graduate of Northwestern. I'm in favor of this special permit. I think that as we look at housing and some of the properties, we need to look at creative opportunities to take advantage of how we can maintain some of the what has been built and how we can improve our area and improve the taxes, which has been addressed earlier. I think from the size standpoint, the number of cars that the current resident has, I think, is not going to be offset by the number of units here. The noise levels, I think, we've seen that I don't believe that that's going to happen, that 4 units is going to be disruptive into this area. When you look at some of the creative ways that we've addressed parking in different areas, including what's on Central Street, both in terms of the new cafe that just opened or some of the properties where the Starbucks, I think there's ways to get around what's happened here, and we're talking about 4 units with possibly 4 cars, and I think the current resident has even 3 cars. So I don't see that it's going to be a disruptive, and so I'm in full favor of this permit.
Next speaker, and if we could just kind of hold down the applause so get through a little more quickly. Candace Kuzmark? Thank you. I'm sorry, Kuzmarski.
Good evening. There wouldn't be an applause for me anyway because I think I'm the minority. I live at 1430 Sheridan across from Dawes Park. I've been in my home for almost 20 years, and it seems like I've been fighting for 20 years to try and keep my neighborhood as a single-family neighborhood. We're very close to downtown. I love that commercial district, but I don't think we need to pull it down into the residences. And as far as, being a good comp that a house is sold for such a significant amount. I don't think that that would benefit any of our homes, especially because the appraisers, they're pretty smart. They would find out that that house sold at that price and was, in fact, not going to be a single-family home. So I don't think we can really use that argument as a reason to upgrade our neighborhood by the fact that we would have one sale that is, significantly higher than perhaps what it should be if it was priced on the open market for a single family to come up to the neighborhood and upgrade the house and live there and enjoy the neighborhood for 20 years like I've enjoyed the neighborhood. So once again, I am not in favor of this special use. Thank you.
The next three speakers, Barbara Janes, Jean Lindwall, and Bob Barr.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Janes. I live at 802 Colfax Street. I am here tonight to encourage you to support ZBA's recommendation to deny the special use application for a B&B at 300 Church Street. Over many years, my neighbors and I, who live west of Sherman in the 1st and 5th wards, have worked diligently with our neighbors, our aldermen, and city staff to ensure that housing standards are enforced and regulations are tightened to preserve the quality of life and property values in residential neighborhoods near campus. We were shocked to learn that according to city staff, the Evanston zoning ordinance allows a basement apartment to be constructed in a single-family house in a residential zone as an accessory use for a B&B. This is a terrible idea and creates a precedent that, if accepted, will be difficult to reverse. We have learned from experience that once a basement apartment is allowed, it is almost impossible to remove. If you allow this B&B under these conditions, it will send a very somber message to residents who have been working to stop overcrowding of single-family homes. With the type of shenanigans we have witnessed in the past, developers will embrace this B&B model. They will and use it as a way to rent to many unrelated people, and particularly in our area, students. And they will use it as a way to construct an additional lucrative rental unit in the basement. If this precedent is allowed to happen, my husband and I, who have a small condo in Colorado, could build an apartment in our basement in our neighborhood, create an LLC, and have one of our so-called partners live in the basement and operate our single-family home as a B&B while we're off in the mountains. The ordinance says owner occupied, and that means, I would think, the majority owner. Does that make sense? This is not what I or my neighbors want in our neighborhood that we have worked so hard to protect. My neighbors and I would be very disappointed if you open that door. Instead, we hope you will vote to support the ZBA decision and follow up by closing this loophole in the zoning ordinance to help us to continue to protect our investment in Evanston and our residential neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Jean Lindwall, 625 Library Place. I'm speaking on behalf of Bob Adkins, President of Northwestern Neighbors, who could not be here tonight, to urge you to support ZBA's recommendation to deny the special use application for a B&B at 300 Church. Our neighborhood has had a long history of involvement in Evanston zoning issues related to commercial and institutional intrusions, given our proximity to the downtown and Northwestern University. Our focus has been on dialogue and balance to ensure that neighborhood quality of life is respected, especially in Evanston's single-family neighborhoods. These are values that we share with residents in neighborhoods all over Evanston. We are concerned with the precedent that would be set by allowing the proposed B&B at 300 Church under the proposed ownership structures. In talking with many individuals that were involved in the development of Evanston's 1993 zoning regulations, it is apparent that B&Bs were envisioned as essentially a home occupation rather than a commercial entity organized as a limited partnership. We understand that supporters of the B&B have suggested that this application should be approved and the regulations tightened up for the next application. If the City Council believes that B&Bs are to be encouraged, it would be best to deny this application and then refer the matter to the Plan Commission so that public input can be received and considered and regulations established to ensure that property values are maintained and adverse impacts can be addressed during the approval process. It is never a good idea to let the horse out of the barn and then decide later that you should have closed the barn door. We are also concerned with the staff interpretation that a basement apartment can be constructed in a single-family house in a residential zone as an accessory use to a B&B. I agree with the previous speaker that this is a terrible idea and could be used as an argument for creating basement apartments in single-family houses all over Evanston. It seems clear to us that B&B guest rooms are intended to be the accessory use and not the basement apartment. Overcrowding and illegal units are issues all over Evanston, and we are very concerned with the precedent that this case would set with respect to parking and other neighborhood impacts. ZBA gave due consideration to this matter in their deliberations, and their decision should be supported. The ZBA recommendation should not be overturned unless there is a clear demonstration that their decision was legally or factually in error, which has not been demonstrated in this matter. We ask that the ZBA decision be affirmed. Thank you.
Bob Barr. The next two speakers are Jan Halperin and Ted Struve.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Robert Barr. I live at 1144 Asbury Avenue, but I'm here tonight representing the Evanston History Center. I am a past president of the History Center and currently a member of the Board of Trustees. The History Center, as you know, is located in the Charles Gates Dawes House at 225 Greenwood, just 3 blocks directly south of this proposed use. And we have a deep interest, as I'm sure the committee can understand, in the renovation and preservation of historic buildings and historic homes in Evanston. The proposed use would be in such a building, so we're very interested in this particular proposal, as we are interested in proposals which would encourage tourism and visitors to Evanston. I just want to go on record of our deep concern with this matter.
Thank you. Jay Halperin. And Ted Struve, you'll be the last speaker. I'm sorry, Jan Halperin.
Hi, I'm Jan Halperin. I am a resident of Chicago, but I work at the Evanston History Center at 225 Greenwood Street. And I can only echo what Mr. Barr said, that we can neither endorse nor oppose any regulations here, but we certainly support the historic tourism movement that's going on in this country and welcome the visitors that we expect to come with this bed and breakfast opening, possible opening. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ted Struve. I live at 800 Elgin Road. I've been a resident of Evanston for most of my adult years. I have children, grandchildren in the schools in Evanston. I'm interested in this because about 10 years ago, my neighbor, a very nice lady, wanted to sell her a very nice old home to somebody from Washington who wanted to establish a bed and breakfast. The neighborhood was pretty much solidly against it, and fortunately the sale did not go through, and instead a very nice family moved in there who are a real credit to Evanston, and I would hope that that would happen here. I'd like to read a letter which was given to me by Chris Ernst. I'm writing to you today to urge you to accept the Zoning Board of Appeals recommendations to deny a special use for 300 Church as a bed and breakfast. As I live within a block of the proposed business establishment, I am well aware of the many issues that opening a residential hotel, let's call it what it really is, in an R1 district. Let me be clear that I'm not opposed to an individual homeowner operating a B&B as defined in the city code. However, I want to be crystal clear that the proposed special use is not the same thing. Evergreen LLC is a commercial business, plain and simple. Their plan is to house an employee in the basement of a residential property while using the 3 floors above as hotel establishment. There is a clear and legal difference, a company operating a residential hotel and a single homeowner offering a spare room or 2 and serving breakfast. Key points. 1, if you grant the special use as a bed and breakfast, you will be setting a precedent that any property in an R1 district can be used as a residential hotel. Point 2, the city code that addresses bed and breakfast establishments clearly did not address this type of use. Point 3, the city will lose out on any hotel tax and lose the opportunity to adequately regulate the use of business if approved under the B&B code. 4, calling this project a bed and breakfast is not correct. It is clearly a commercial business which has the potential for defining uses in all residential neighborhoods in Evanston. I would urge you to follow the recommendations of the Zoning Board of Appeals and deny the special use as proposed. Living within about a block of the property, I can assure you that with the exception of the current owner and 1 or 2 close neighbors, some with potential conflicts of interest, there is not support for this project. Again, if I were a single family opening up a B&B in their home, it would be an appropriate use. As proposed, is a violation of the intent of the zoning ordinance and an unwelcome precedent. Chris Ernst. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the comments. And do we have a motion yet? I understand the applicant's here.
We have one more comment. The gentleman who lives within close proximity, I think his testimony may be a little bit different from everyone else.
Very quickly. Is he what? Wait, so do you live within, where do you live?
1629 Judson, which is right around the corner, and in the alley, our garage is next to the garage that backs up to the property. So we're quite close there.
And your name?
I'm Paul Brown, and my wife Margot and I live at 1629 Judson, just around the corner, as I said, and very close to the property. As a close neighbor, I'd like to make a couple of points. We're not worried about harming our property values. In fact, I think the arguments that in fact improving the property and updating it would actually help property values in the neighborhood. And I don't think it's a commercialization of the neighborhood. B&Bs are by definition in residential neighborhoods, and so I think this fits that very well. We're not worried about parking and noise. As a couple people have mentioned, the current owners and many of the other owners in the neighborhood have a number of cars, and the idea that having a bed and breakfast is going to cause this big influx of traffic and parking is sort of very confusing to me. All same thing applies to the noise. The nature of guests at a bed and breakfast is such that they don't cause parking problems and noise. As I've commented a couple times, if we're concerned about extra traffic, parking, and noise in our neighborhoods, we'd have to outlaw anybody who had teenagers. I don't think bed and breakfast guests fall into that category. So I'm very hopeful that you will reverse the ZBA recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you for all the comments, and What is before us is the ZBA recommendation to deny the application, and is there a motion on that?
I move that we accept the ZBA recommendation and deny the special use permit to operate a bed and breakfast at 300 Church Street.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the point? Well, actually, we do have a brief presentation from Mr. Scott, who's here representing the applicant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Andrew Scott. I'm with the law offices of Dykema Gossett here on behalf of the applicant, Evergreen Manor LLC. We do indeed have our full team here, Paul Janicki, the architect, Kathy Overend, who's going to be the operator of the bed and breakfast, and also Mary Lindberger. More than happy to give you details on the operations of the bed and breakfast. We can tell you about the type of work that's going to be done if there's interest in that. In the interest of brevity, I'm more than happy just to stick to the points that have been raised by various folks that are in opposition. So I'll leave it to the discretion of the chair.
Why don't you go ahead and answer those questions, and we can ask questions as we proceed with the discussion.
Okay. An issue that's been raised quite a number of times, do we meet the intent of the ordinance? And, I think as one gentleman spoke to before, that was Mr. Swanson, everybody's been trying to read intent into what the ordinance was. What were people thinking back in 1993? The fact of the matter is there is no language that gives us any guidance on it. All we're left with is the plain language of the ordinance. There's no intent, no whereases clauses that were brought into the ordinance. It's just simply the black and white language of the ordinance itself, and so it is impossible to divine intent. So I think it's also very important to know, in case it didn't make into your packets, your own corporation counsel has already opined on this issue, and they have said that we meet the intent. We meet the plain language of the ordinance. We meet the owner-occupied requirements. Our structure is we've got an LLC. Some people have said that that's some kind of nefarious way to backdoor this project. Maybe it's to create some great number of other bed and breakfasts all along the lakefront. The truth of the matter is it's an accepted way of doing business. It's a way to mitigate liability, and it's also a way to mitigate taxes. We've heard comments about this should be a mom and pop organization, and I think my only comment to that in the context of a limited liability company is that if my mom and pop were going to do something like this, I would strenuously advise them to do it as a limited liability company. And so there's absolutely nothing that's nefarious about doing this in the format of an LLC. We've also heard comments about whether or not this is accessory use. We've heard comments about the unit in the basement. The fact of the matter is that the operator, Kathy Overend, she will be living in the basement. There was some concern that was raised at the Zoning Board of Appeal. We've got a kitchen down there, and so this is going to be some back door into creating another dwelling unit in the house. Absolutely not our intent, never was our intent. And to that end, we have absolutely no problem agreeing to taking out the kitchen that we had proposed for the basement area, and then it absolutely will never be used as a dwelling unit down there. The fact of the matter is, this is going to be Kathy's home. It's going to remain a single-family home. She is going to live on the first floor. The bedrooms are upstairs. There are going to be 5 guest bedrooms up above. She's going to occupy the first and second floor. She's going to use the storage areas on the second and third floor, just as she would as if this were her own home. There's the other issue that we've talked about, which is this sets a dangerous precedent. And I respectfully disagree with anybody that makes that allegation, because frankly, the city already has the controls in place to make sure that there is not a profligation of bed and breakfast. Your own ordinance says that one of the standards that you can consider when trying to determine whether or not to grant a special use for a bed and breakfast is what the cumulative effect of the particular applicant or application is going to be on the neighborhood, immediate vicinity, and also the city in general. And so the fact of the matter is there's already a control there that you have, a perfectly legitimate reason that's already written into your code that says when enough is enough in terms of the number of bed and breakfasts. And I think another important regulation that is outside of the city's control but a very powerful force is the market itself. There just simply isn't enough room for many, many bed and breakfasts. I mean, Colonel Pritzker intends, along with his partners, to make a significant investment in this home. And quite frankly, if there's not a market People are not going to be filing application after application to have bed and breakfasts in the city. I've heard the comment on a number of occasions that this deviating from a single-family neighborhood. The fact of the matter is, the city's zoning ordinance already recognizes a bed and breakfast as a special use, as something that's consistent with and compatible with an R1 zoning. So I honestly don't believe that that is a persuasive argument there. Mr. Struve, he likes to characterize this as a hotel, and let's not get lost in that. That is not what this is. The city already has a separate definition for hotels and motels. They're not a permitted use in an R1 district. If we were proposing to do a hotel, we wouldn't even be standing here today. The fact of the matter is, we're proposing a use that is already written into your zoning ordinance, already contemplated as a use that is consistent with single-family homes and multiple family homes, quite frankly, in the city. There's one other point, just to clarify. I believe it was Ms. Lindwall that made the comment that we were sort of the mind, let us go through and let the city worry about tightening up the regulations for the next guy. That's absolutely not true. I don't know where that came from, but the fact of the matter is we are operating within the confines of the Evanston Municipal Code. Your corporation council has already opined to all of these points, and it's not a matter of tightening it up for the next person. So again, we've got all the members of our team, if there's interest in how it's going to be operated, what the work is that we're going to be doing. One of the other points that we heard from Spark and also the Zoning Board of Appeals was this concern about parking and how there wasn't going to be any parking. Fact of the matter is, we have 3 parking spaces on site. We have the availability for another parking space to lease across the alley. We went out after the Zoning Board of Appeals, conceitedly, after the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we retained our own parking consultant. He's available to testify, and he will give his professional opinion that this absolutely does not present a parking issue for the neighborhood. It's something that we thought intuitively we already knew, but we went out and hired him just the same. And then finally, if there's any concerns about property values, you heard from Mr. Brown, somebody who is within 500 feet of the proposed property, say that he's not concerned about the impact of a bed and breakfast on his property values. But we also have Mary Lindberger, who is a professional appraiser, who can offer her opinion as to how the proposed use will not have an adverse impact on surrounding property values. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey.
In reading my packet tonight, over the weekend, packet for tonight, there was a reference to the Preservation Commission. The Preservation Commission reviewed this use, is that correct?
That is correct. And
they supported this?
They were fully in support, yes. They asked us to make some minor modifications to the garage doors, but yes.
Right. Did they, I did not read their minutes, did they deal with the use, the Preservation Commission? Did they talk about that?
They talked about it only in the context of your zoning ordinance requires them to make a recommendation on the use, and yes, they favorably recommended the use.
Right, because one of the things that struck me listening to people tonight is many people here are very involved in the preservation movement in the city of Evanston, and it is always a great concern of theirs that issues be approved or denied, at least reviewed by the Preservation Commission. And I thought it was interesting that nobody mentioned that. I went to the home. I went to the Pritzker house, and I viewed all of the problems and issues from the exterior of the house next door, the house in question. And I can honestly say, and I know I don't live in as important a home as many of you do, but as an observer, I can tell you, I don't believe I've ever seen a home in more pristine condition than the Pritzker house. I mean, from the outside, from the inside, I was truly awestruck. And one of the big impressions made upon me was a statement that Mr. Pritzker made when he said, I'm going to make that house as nice as this house. And we talked about the slate tiles on the roof. Each one of those is going to be removed and numbered. Now, anybody on this city council knows about slate roofs. We've been talking about one for at least 10 years and finally just gave up and had something that looks like slate put up there. But I was extremely impressed. If nothing else, the preservation of this gorgeous home, the 300 Church Street home, to me is just a monumental, important thing. I found it interesting also tonight to hear Mr. Swanson speak, who was with the John Buck Company. Many of the people in this room tonight fought the building of the John Buck building, where the former Washington National building was. And I think that has proven to be a very respectable, I know there are students and bicycles in the building, but it has contributed to this community, and especially the Whole Foods, and that entire corner is just, I mean, I just always sort of smile when I make that turn and look at that. So the fact that this is a special use means it is an acceptable use based on negotiating different terms and conditions. Interesting, one of the people who spoke tonight about the zoning ordinance actually works for the company that did the zoning ordinance in 1993. I guess when I saw that the Zoning Board of Appeals denied this, I was shocked, absolutely shocked. I think the standards were met. To say because there are five cars, it creates congestion, I think is really, really stretching it. The fact that we have, it's somebody from staff, Steve, we have no licensed bed and breakfasts in Evanston, do we?
No, we don't, ma'am.
No, we don't. Have we ever had a licensed bed and breakfast? We all know, folks, that there's been bed and breakfasts in Evanston that were not licensed. So this is a legitimate operation. I'm not so sure I would want Mr. Pritzker running this. I think the people he's going to have in there are people who, the woman who's going to do this is going to do a fabulous job, and nobody is going to be impacted more if it isn't run properly. And look, we know that this is going to be run properly. This is a fake issue. The parking's a fake issue, and the fact that an owner, that Mr. Pritzker's not living in there, owning it, running it, is a fake issue. I think we ought to take a look at our ordinance that defines bed and breakfast and say, hey, maybe we ought to have professionals running this. You know, maybe that will make it more at least more stable. I just haven't heard one good, real argument. I sold a house. I lived in a house that had a kitchen in the basement. That wasn't an apartment. There was a kitchen in the basement. The family that lived before had a kitchen on the first floor and a kitchen on the basement. House sold in one day because the family that came and looked at it said, oh my God, you've got a kitchen in the basement. That's exactly what we want. So kitchens in the basement, I mean, it was just an amazing thing. One day, full price, 1316 Dobson. Alderman Nguyen and Alderman Fisk, I just cannot believe you're not embracing this. The restoration of this house, the money that's going to be poured into it, the quality of people who are going to be guests at this bed and breakfast, it just seems to me exactly the people we want to bring to our lakefront, to our community, to go to the History Museum, to go to our downtown, to go to our lake. You know, you can continue to keep people in my ward off the lakefront after 11 o'clock at night because we're not allowed to park there and we can't walk there. But I really don't think you're going to be able to keep everybody off the lakefront for forever. I mean, a bed and breakfast is a perfect use for this beautiful home. Perfect use. It's starting to get really exclusive around here, and I'm not liking the tone. I thought it was very impressive to hear the immediate neighbors speak to the support of this use. And I'm going to encourage all of the council to overturn and get an ordinance that will make this a special use at 300 Church Street.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you. Well, I sat through the Spark meetings and the ZBA meetings, both of them. And last week we had a ward meeting where we specifically addressed this issue. There was so much interest in the issue that we arranged for a specific time during the 2-hour ward meeting to discuss this. At that meeting, I felt that I presented a fair overview of what was being proposed, as well as the ZBA recommendation. I invited people not only to speak at the meeting, but to let me know through email communications and telephone calls what their feelings were after the meeting, and I heard from a ton of people. And basically, what I know is that there really is not support for this in the neighborhood, and it's not based on what Colonel Pritzker would do at the house. Everyone who has visited the Pritzker house knows that he has the resources to do a magnificent job with any property that he purchases. I would be the first one to tell him that, and I have told him that. It would be lovely if we all had those same resources, but most of us don't. So that's not the issue. The issue really, for me, lies in what the ZBA identified as the problems with this application. The problem is that this is really a commercial use in a residential zone. We have never gone here before. Our zoning ordinance clearly, and I'm looking at the vote of ZBA here, they were clearly struggling. It is one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. They said, no, it's not. And as Ms. Singh, who did work on the Citizen Committee in 1992 to address these issues, the intent was never, back then when we were thinking about whether to create room for a B&B in our zoning ordinance, it was never to create a commercial use in a residential zone. It was, as she accurately described, a way for a homeowner to make a little bit of extra money with a couple of spare bedrooms, serving breakfast maybe to Northwestern parents coming and visiting Evanston. That's not what we have here. What we have here is an application where the 98% owner of the LLC is not going to live on site. He's going to live next door, but he's not living on site. Our zoning ordinance says that B&Bs must be owner-occupied. They're going to be occupied by a 1% owner. And whoever raised the issue, I think it may have been Mr. Henderson who raised the issue of what happens to the LLC. I mean, LLCs do go on forever. And is there a way to put restrictions on that? I'm not sure when you're dealing with a situation where somebody has invested perhaps $3 million, perhaps $4 million into establishing a business, renovating a house. I'm not sure that future councils are going to be inclined to say, well, Ms. Overend is gone, so now we're going to shut down the B&B. So I'm struggling with how to make that restriction or potential restriction work in this case. I think the proper description of what's being offered here is a boutique guest hotel. And I think that we need to look at our zoning ordinance and decide whether a boutique guest hotel is what we want in our residential neighborhoods. And if it is, we should certainly write that into our zoning ordinance, and we should think about it. I think the suggestion that this should go back to the Plan Commission for adequate public input is a very good one. We have never had a B&B in Evanston. In some ways, we're doing what perhaps we should have done years ago, and that's talk about what the impact of this kind of use would be on a neighborhood. But normally, you don't do that until you have an application. And way back when, in 1992, we were thinking in much, much different terms. There was some discussion when I met with the applicant about starting slowly and working up toward special events, so that if you rented a room, you would be allowed to have special events, whether they were a shower, a party, wedding reception. There's going to be more than 12 to 15 people at various times on this site. And I'm not so concerned about the parking for a normal use of 1 or 2 rooms being occupied. I'm worried about what happens to the neighborhood when there are special events and when there is a great demand for parking in an area that is already very, very restricted to parking. If what we want to do is attract people to our lakefront to visit the History Center, perhaps we should build a hotel on the lakefront. I don't think we want to go that way. We've just sat through several months of meetings where we talked about that, and that was rejected. That's inconsistent with the lakefront plan that we passed and was worked on for years and years with the residents. So I'm going to encourage my my fellow members on this committee to vote this down, but to take a look and refer back to the committee a discussion of what it is that a B&B classification really should be. What do we expect it to be? And how are we going to not open up our very fragile residential neighborhoods? In the First Ward, we have 2 very fragile neighborhoods. Third Ward, same thing. 7th Ward can be also considered lakefront. But how we structure a potential use for this type of facility. But this is certainly not what is intended right now by the zoning ordinance. ZBA also found that it wasn't in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. The other standard that was not met was the concern about traffic congestion. Again, if any of you have any questions about how long and how thoughtful the ZBA was, you can certainly review their deliberations and the questions that they asked. But I was very impressed with these residents, none of whom live on the lakefront, but whose job it really is to consider special uses and make a recommendation to the City Council. And I thought they were exceptionally professional and thoughtful in their deliberations. So I would ask your support to deny.
Okay,
I
but
think citizen comment is over.
okay, yeah, and I'm sorry, but the citizen comment is over, and we're trying to get through.
I have one point only.
Is it something completely different and unique than anything that's been said so far?
It is.
Okay, let me get through our discussion.
No, that's okay.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but a minute, not multiple minutes.
I got it.
Okay.
My name is Linda Cooper. I live at 420 Church, which is a block away from this resident, and I'm concerned about two groups of people. The people that use the park, the families that have picnics and camp out and play soccer and all that kind of stuff. Well, they continue to feel welcome across from residents that's aimed to entertain ambassadors. And also, in this area, less fit and less young people with their aids or their wheelchairs or their walkers and canes, they walk around this area several times a day, or they walk down Church. And I'm wondering, how welcome they're going to feel having to manipulate themselves around all of the, people who are going to be coming and going from this resident.
All right, thank you. Alderman Nguyen.
Thanks. I have a couple of points I'd like to, I have a couple of questions I have for staff and a couple of points I'd like to make. First, the 2 illegal bed and breakfasts were in the 3rd Ward. One of them was across the street from me for 4 years. So I don't have problems. They both existed when I was elected. I knew both the owners. I never blew the whistle on them. It was a little hard to do that to my neighbor across the street because she needed the money. Neither of them had signs. They were owner occupied. They were exactly what we wrote in the ordinance. They just never applied for, they never went through the process. Neither of them exist anymore, to the best of my knowledge. The other fact here is that Mr. Struve's example also happened in the 3rd Ward. The house that he's referring to is owned by the Flanagans. They have 5 children. It has been magnificently restored. I believe it's been on the Mother's Day House Walk. I don't think there's a single part of it that is not absolutely exquisite. It would have been a bed and breakfast. Maybe it would have been as beautifully restored, but a single family bought it, and they have 5 wonderful children. And it has been an asset to our community every single minute that it has been there. But fundamentally, it isn't a matter of who's part of this LLC or not. I think if you asked a reasonable person on the street, what's a bed and breakfast? Their definition to you would be a place that you stay, where the owner is part of the establishment. They make you breakfast. You stay in their house. That's not what the application is all about here. And that's what my objection is to. I mean, I did not object to living across the street from a B&B. I didn't object when a very well-known family in my ward owned one for a number of years. But that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at an owner who owns 1% of this operation. And actually, one of the supporters actually called it a facility. I thought that was interesting. It wasn't a home, it was a facility. That's not my definition of a B&B. And I know we can talk, the lawyers can talk, and we all can talk. I've done it as a lawyer about what does the statute say. But that's not really what we all define it as. And I see that the ZBA had trouble with that as well. So that's one of my biggest concerns here. Who is the owner? An LLC, yeah, sure. I mean, if the 2 people who owned an LLC, and I would urge my parents to turn it into an LLC too, if they owned and operated a B&B, I would have them do it too. But that's not, but I would say that if we rewrite this ordinance, and I think we absolutely have to, we have to define ownership to be something significant. No, ownership has to be well past 50%, in my opinion. I'm also very concerned about the legal department's definition or this memo regarding a basement apartment. It's pretzel logic in my mind. I don't understand it. I agree with the speakers who were very concerned and alarmed by it. The 3rd Ward is a part of the community that over the years has had lots of graduate students or students living in it. Also, directly across the street from me was probably the last surviving boarding house in Evanston. And that was something that the League of Women Voters worked to have ordinances passed so that they were grandfathered in and then abolished in Evanston, except until the last person died who owned them. Well, the last person who owned one in Evanston lived across the street from me, and they died in the late 70s. So, all of these things are, so what I'm talking about is the pressures that occurred to divide up houses and how hard people worked in Evanston to return it to a single-family neighborhood. The Southeast Evanston Association was formed, as many of you know, because there was a lot of discussion about turning Forest Avenue into a 4-lane road. That's when Southeast Evanston Association formed in the 50s, because they recognized that once you have that level of traffic driving through that portion of Evanston, it's just a matter of time before people don't want to live on it. And the other concern that I have that's very significant is during my time on the council, originally the interpretation of our zoning department was that special uses ran with the land. And gradually we have convinced the zoning department, and the zoning department has agreed that special uses can run with the applicant, that we can limit it. I don't see how we limit this. The applicant is an LLC. You can change members of an LLC. How could you limit this to the 1% owner? As Alderman Fisk referred to, what if Ms. Overland leaves? She's only a 1% over. I want the legal department to do a better analysis on how we could limit, as we do so many other special uses, how do we limit this to this particular use as it's being used? Because that's a concern of mine. I don't want to create an endless open bed and breakfast at this site. I mean, this may be operated absolutely magnificently, but we don't know who the next operator is. And also, I don't want to make it so that the property then has to be a B&B. I do question the issue of comparable value, because, and I think an appraiser will recognize that this is a guest house. It's not a single-family home. And I want to make one more point, and this is to Kent Swanson, who I've known for a long, long time. He was my son's cub master. Kent, after hearing what we just did, we're going to do in a single night. Oh, they've all left from D.L. Piper. Where's David Reifman?
Just me, they didn't leave.
In a single night, we are changing and approving the PUD for the Sienna property. If you remember how long that property was under scrutiny by the City Council, in a single night we are introducing and suspending the rules. If we are not friendly to the business community, I don't know what is. We have the Amley property being developed in my ward. We have held that on in abeyance for 3 years till they could get financing. We are about to go with something at Maine and Chicago. We've been working with your former CEO of John Buck. We are working all over Evanston on economic development. The message is loud and clear that we have a different economic development department operating now, and we have a really, really different message going out to the community. Denial of this application for an LLC to operate a B&B, that's nothing to the business community. What we're doing here tonight and up and down Chicago Avenue and so many other places in Evanston, that's the really strong message to the business community. Thank you.
I guess I have a few comments too, but go ahead.
If I have a couple of very large rooms in my house, I can have an event anytime I want. I can have and have had 100 cars, 100 people come to my house and park on the street. If Mr. Pritzker wanted to have a fundraiser at his home, or the Doyles who live next door have lots of fundraisers, nobody has to ask anybody for permission for that. And so I don't know that raising the issue of special events is really significant, because we can all do that without getting permission right now. So, and you know, LLCs, they expire all the time. I mean, frequently, because of who owns things in my ward, I'm looking at the Secretary of State's site, and they expire. They're not a lifetime thing. You have to maintain them. So I don't know why this LLC is being so overblown. Anyway, I think, it's nice that finally some people on our council are supporting economic development of large projects. But I think we have to remember the smaller projects as well. And if I hear the corner of Church and Sheridan referred to one more time as a fragile neighborhood, I'm going to screech, because I can show you some fragile neighborhoods, and that's not one of them. And I think you diminish the quality of life when you mention that that's a fragile neighborhood. If it's a fragile neighborhood, shame on us. It's not. So, it's not.
All right, and yes.
The fragility of neighborhoods doesn't really have anything to do with the price of the houses in the neighborhood.
I'm not talking about the prices. I'm talking about the fragility of the neighborhood. And you don't have to give me a lecture on what that means.
I'm
Trust
not
me.
lecturing you.
Yes, you are.
There, in these two areas in the first ward, basically these neighborhoods are a block and a half wide. They're impacted on all sides by various more intensive uses. And as we have known and has been testified to, Northwestern Neighbors, Southeast Evanston Association, a number of the condominiums along Hinman Avenue, all of these people have been working very, very hard for many, many years to retain the character of the neighborhoods. And we've done a very good job with that.
Yes,
and
you have.
we have done a very good job of that. The other thing about the special events was raised actually at ZBA, and it was one of the concerns of ZBA members when one of the members specifically asked in response to how much money was going to be invested in the house, how long it would take to recoup that investment. And in response to that question was a statement that it would take a long time to recoup the investment, but there was also going to be an aggressive marketing plan put into place and enacted. And that really raised the concern of neighbors. An aggressive marketing plan can be, maybe you and your house would have one wedding every 10 years in your house. Maybe not. But we're talking, again, about a facility that's going to be out marketing itself to attract people to come and stay at the house and use the house in this manner. Again, neighbors just do not feel that this is an appropriate use, and it is very, very much different than a single-family house. So thanks.
All right, and just a few of my views. Unfortunately, I think what we are faced with is partially a function of falling victim to the drafting of the ordinance the way it was drafted originally, and now we have to work around that, and the applicants have made some legitimate points, and the neighbors on both sides of the argument have made legitimate points. And I think it's important to look at what will happen if Ms. Overend is no longer operating the B&B. I don't know that that's been fleshed out fully. Would the owner be in a position of having to shut down the B&B after investing this massive amount of money? That would obviously be a bad result for everybody. So I think we need to get that clarified. And I don't think we should turn this into a discussion about exclusion or keeping people off the lake, because that's not what it's about. Both sides have legitimate points. It's an R1 district. On the other hand, it is a high-end use. It's not something that's inappropriate for the neighborhood. And I think we should try to figure out what the most appropriate result should be. And as Alderman Nguyen mentioned, whatever happens, this is not a reflection of our views on business. And I think our recent history shows that we are doing our best to promote business as best we can. So I think that concludes the discussion. We have a motion to support, or I guess uphold the ZBA's recommendation. So all those in favor of upholding the ZBA's recommendation to deny, say aye.
Aye.
And those who are opposed to upholding the ZBA's recommendation, say nay. Nay. Okay, there are 3-2 with the prevailing view to not uphold the ZBA recommendation. And the way I understand it is procedure-wise is that this will proceed to council hopefully now, and as part of our agenda, and the full council will vote on it for action as to whether or not we adopt the ZBA recommendation. So this committee's...
Could you read the yay and nays, please? For the record?
The nays were Alderman Nguyen and Fisk, and the ayes were Fisk and Nguyen. Nays were Wilson, Holmes, and Rainey. And do we have any communications?
None
Other items for discussion?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We will resume hopefully momentarily with the